안녕하세요. 여러분의 한국어 선생님 고빌입니다. Welcome to the fourth part in my series where I analyze the Korean speaking of MONSTA X. Now, if this is your first time seeing me, I'm a Korean teacher who's been learning Korean for over 20 years and teaching it here on YouTube for over 13 years. And so far, we've analyzed Shonu, Minhyuk, Kiyeon, and today we're going to be talking about none other than HYUNGWON. So my analysis here will include everything that I've noticed about him over these past 4 weeks, and some of this will definitely be information that you're missing out on if you don't already speak Korean, including how he sounds when he speaks, any unique expressions he uses, and dialect. Oh my God, he uses a lot of dialect sometimes, as well as my analysis of his writing. Just everything that stands out to me as a Korean teacher, and a lot stands out. But first, I want to thank the sponsor of this video series, my wonderful, amazing, and attractive Patreon supporters and my YouTube channel members. All of you who help keep the lights on here and allow me to make these videos without filling them with advertisements. And if you're not already one of my Patreon members, please consider joining my Patreon right now. It really helps me to keep all of these videos free and to keep making more Korean learning content. You can watch multiple full video courses that are completely free, download a dozen Korean cheat sheets, pre-made study notebooks, and weekly lessons, and I'm going to keep making more. So check out my Patreon page in the video description, and now let's get started with the analysis. So today I'll be looking at HYUNGWON, whose full name is Chae HYUNGWON.
네, 안녕하세요, 형원입니다.
예.
얼굴 웃기네. 내 유혹한
HYUNGWON was born in January of 1994 in the city of Gwangju, which is the 6th largest city in South Korea and is located in the southwest part of the country in an area known as the South Jeolla province. And he lived there in Gwangju and went to school there all the way until he joined Starship Entertainment. And I have to say that I'm really excited to share that he can and does speak dialect. And we'll get to that in a bit. Now, his main role is lead dancer, and he also does sub vocals. In his free time, he also performs as a DJ. He goes by the name DJ H1, and he also makes remixes of songs.
확실히 DJ네. 확실히 DJ야. 확실히 H1이야.
So before I look at HYUNGWON's speech, let's talk about my first impressions. Just like before, I'm only going to be showing a few clips from my research. So here are the first clips that I want to share with you.
메인 디저트잖아요.
네, 저희 가게 핵심이거든요. 어떻게 저희 가게 망할 것 같, 아니 망하진 않을 것 같죠?
네.
이렇게 딱 소리가 나요? 내 거다. 마음에 드는데?
My first impression of HYUNGWON is that he's very positive and that he's a little goofy. Not that he's always telling jokes or shouting or trying to make everyone laugh. He has a more dry sense of humor. He'll often do things that aren't funny on the surface, like maybe overreacting to something or making a silly face, but he does make a lot of jokes that are funny in that context. Like here's after he did the opening pitch for a baseball game, and he's giving himself a hard time for how he threw it. And while he was definitely disappointed in his pitch, he's overreacting here, I think so that everyone around him won't feel bad for him. And he's able to turn a kind of awkward situation into a humorous one. So take a look.
무릎 꿇을 걸 거기서.
Okay, so let's talk about his Korean a little bit. First, his usage of polite speech. Now, I previously said that all of the members just use 반말, or casual speech to each other, despite their ages, because they're all like a family. And it's common in a family to just use 반말 between all of the family members. However, something really interesting about HYUNGWON is that while he uses casual speech toward most of the other members most of the time, he also tends to use 존댓말, meaning polite speech, more often than the other members. First, Here are two short clips of HYUNGWON speaking politely to Shonu, who's 2 years older.
저 밥 먹고 같이 가면 안 돼요?
그래.
근데 제가 이거랑 스테이크를 시켰거든요.
스테이크가 안 왔어?
아니 왔는데 나에게 보여주려고 하다가 엎어버렸어.
누가?
제가
그래서 못 먹어?
다시 시켰어요.
아. 족발 뼈 이렇게 쏙쏙 발라먹는 그거 좋아해?
그건 별로 안 좋아.
And now here's a clip of HYUNGWON speaking politely to Minhyuk, who's 1 year older.
군대 가기 전에 그거 했잖아.
캔디 크러쉬?
몇 단계까지 했어?
지금 5,000
나도 3,000까지 갔는데.
이게 그거 알죠? 비행기 탈 때도 되는 거 알죠?
Now, the rules of when you're supposed to use casual speech or polite speech aren't actually that strict. It's more of a feeling, but typically with family members, you would use casual speech since it more has a friendly or a close feeling. And polite speech has more of a respectful feeling and also a soft feeling, which is why it's the most useful one when you're meeting a new person or when you're talking to someone who's older than you. But it's not wrong to use polite speech toward other people that you're close with. Remember, it just has a respectful and soft feeling. Now, in most relationships, this could be awkward to speak respectfully or softly towards someone that you're really close with or who you're dating. But if you prefer to maintain that extra feeling of respect towards someone, you can still use polite speech. And in fact, some couples in Korea still prefer using polite speech. So the younger person will use 존댓말 to the older person, and then the older person will use 반말. It's less common, but it's not unusual. And I think that HYUNGWON also prefers to be respectful to other people, even people that he's already close with. So you'll often hear him using a lot of polite speech even when he doesn't really have to, and I think it makes him more unique. In fact, here's a clip of him using polite speech to Juhon, who was also born in 1994, but is technically about 9 months younger than him.
아 어때요? 마음에 들어요?
근데 여기서 들었을 때 괜찮아.
아 그래요?
He's not always using polite speech though, which would actually sound really stiff, kind of like you're avoiding getting too close with someone. But HYUNGWON does often use polite speech, and he'll often use casual speech to the older members too when he wants to sound a bit more friendly, which is also common. So again, it's not like he's always using polite speech, but he does mix it in a lot. And here's a quick clip of him actually using casual speech to Shonu. Now, even though he's using casual speech in this clip, he still calls Shonu using the respectful title hyung, meaning older brother. So it's not like he's just speaking completely casually. Anyway, so in summary, HYUNGWON chooses to speak politely more than not. Okay, next let's talk about his voice, starting with his intonation. Actually, his intonation is standard. There's not much I can really say about it. Here's a clip where he's talking about how he doesn't really have any specific hobbies, but I just want you to pay attention to his intonation here. You can ignore what he's saying or anything else. Just focus on the tone of his voice, how it goes up and down in his sentences.
근데 풋살 같은 걸 좀 하고 싶었는데 너무 많이 다치더라고요.
야, 이거 큰일 나요. 다
그래서
맞죠.
축구도 한 복무하면서 한 5번 안으로 했던 것 같아요.
어.
그 정도밖에 안 했어?
네.
아, 그래서 취미가 뭐예요?
취미가.
그럼 뭐냐고.
그래서 없다고요.
아.
나 좋아. 이렇게 진짜
예?
이렇게
예.
나한테 막 해주는 거 좋아요.
It's pretty smooth, and I like this sort of smooth intonation. It doesn't sound forced at all. This is just the normal way that he talks in public. And let's listen to just one of those parts again, and now let's look at the intonation that he's using.
아, 제가 축구 좋아하잖아요. 근데 풋살 같은 걸 좀 하고 싶었는데 너무 많이 다치더라고요.
야, 이거.
근데 풋살 같은 걸 좀 하고 싶었는데 너무 많이 다치더라고요.
야, 이거.
Each part of the sentence starts by going up a bit. Sentence connectors will slightly go up and then down, and the sentence will end with a downward intonation. So this is all just very standard stuff, and the only deviations are where he's raising his pitch just a little bit in order to think about what he wants to say. So when you hear him say the word 풋살, so it goes up a little bit. But besides that, this is all really standard intonation. However, at the same time, I also think that he has the most extreme intonation among all of the members. When he uses dialect, we get a completely different picture. So now let's talk a little bit about his dialect. So First, I want to show you an example of him using dialect. And here, though, I just want you to focus again on his intonation.
가령 네가 오후 4시에 온다면은 난 3시부터 행복해질 것 같게. 네가 오는 시간이 가까워질수록 나는 무진장 행복해지겠지? 4시가 되면은 난 너무 흥분해갖고 앉을 줄 못하게 될 거야. 나는 행복이 그 자세야 이제 얼마나 소중한지 알게 되는 거지. 근데 네가 아무 때나 불쑥 와버리면 내가 니를 언제쯤 기다려야 되는지 모르지 않게. 그래서 의식이 필요한 거예요.
HYUNGWON is from the city of Gwangju, and this is an area known as the South Jeolla province, which is known for its dialect. And this dialect has smoother intonation than other dialects, like Gyeongsang dialects, like Busan or Daegu. And I have a video clip of him teaching the difference between Jeolla dialect and Gyeongsang dialect, so let's give that a listen.
전라도와 경상도의 사투리 차이는 딱 하나가 있습니다. 자, 우선 표준어로 서울말 어디야가 있어요. 네. 전라도는 첫 어미, 네, 첫 글자에 액센트가 있습니다. 너 어디야를 해보면 니 어디냐 이렇게 합니다.
니 어디냐?
어디냐? 어에 좀 약간 액센트 니 어디냐 이렇게 하죠. 경상도는 그 뒷글자에 액센트를 줍니다. 경상도 나와주시죠. 아니, 니 어디냐 한번 해주시죠. 어디야? 보시죠. 어디고 이 뒤쪽에
보통 경상도는 어디야라고 안 하는 것 같아요.
그렇죠.
고로 많이.
어디고. 근데 어디고 이렇게 안 하잖아요. 어디고 이렇게 뒤쪽에 약간 액센트를 줍니다. 전라도는 앞쪽, 경상도는 뒤쪽.
As HYUNGWON explained, the accent is on the first syllable in Jeolla province instead of toward the end. And most people I've seen who are from Gwangju don't actually speak much dialect because it's just what you'd hear from older people and not what you're going to hear on TV and in movies. Or even if you live there, it's probably not what you'd use with your friends at school. So unless your grandparents raised you, usually you won't hear too much dialect from people from this area, besides maybe a few expressions. But HYUNGWON has a really good grasp of Jeolla dialect. And the reason for this is that his parents also speak this dialect. So he got to grow up surrounded by it as a child. In fact, here's a clip of him imitating his mother, waking him up in the morning.
아이고 짠한 거. 더 잘래? 배나 안 고파? 아이고 짠한 거. 얼른 자.
You can hear the intonation goes higher and lower than standard Korean, but it's not just intonation. He's also actually using correct Jeolla grammar and vocabulary and pronunciation. Now, I'm not going to make this video all about Jeolla dialect. I mean, I actually can't because I don't speak this dialect, but I can tell you a few basic things about it, starting with pronunciation. One feature of this dialect is pronouncing the vowel sounds E and O. Instead, more like And this happens especially with the diphthong 의, which often becomes pronounced as just So the word 의사, for example, meaning doctor, could just become 의사, or the word 어디, meaning where, could become 어디. And I have a clip of HYUNGWON explaining it himself.
의미라 그러거든. 광주에서요. 광주에서 뭐라고 그러더라고? 의미 이렇게 해야 되지. 이가 없어. 이가 없어. 그래서 의사. 의사. 어디냐 이러니까. 너 광주였지. 어디고? 전라도였지.
But not just that, they use some different verb endings which would sound a bit strong in standard Korean, like the verb ending nya. And it's more common to use the ending nya instead of ya when asking questions in casual speech. But again, in standard Korean, this would sound a bit strong. And I have another clip of HYUNGWON also explaining his dialect.
전라도는 어디야보다는 으랍니다. 어디냐 이렇게 합니다. 어디냐 이렇게 합니다. 어디야 이렇게 잘 안 해요. 어디냐 이렇게 해요.
어디냐.
좀 약간 그런 게 있어요.
In fact, a long time ago, I had a Korean tutor from this area who told me that I was pronouncing the word 어디 wrong. And I thought, that's impossible because this word is so simple. And every time I said 어디, they kept asking me to try again until they finally told me I had to say it more like 어디. And yeah, they had no idea that they were even speaking dialect. Another thing that you'll hear in Jeolla dialect, and we heard it with Minhyuk too, whose parents are from this area, is sometimes saying D instead of the standard 대 ending. Like here in the word 지났는데, you might hear him pronounce it as 지났는디. And this is also something that you can hear in that dialect region. Another thing that he does often when he's using dialect is replacing the ending yo with yo. And again, this isn't just a soft yo like you might hear in standard Korean, like 안녕하세요, like that. But this is more of like a clear yo sound. So instead of the expression 뭐예요 or 뭐야, like what is it in standard Korean, this would become just 뭐요.
뭐야? 튀어나와있죠.
They also use this pronunciation commonly in Chungcheong province, which is just to the north of Jeolla province.
이거 무요 얼음이요.
And before I move on, I want to teach just one more ending to look out for, and that's 단계 or 단계요 for when speaking politely.
난 3시부터 행복해질 거야 함께. 난 3시부터 행복해질 거야 함께.
When this ending is attached to the verb ending 다, it becomes 단계. Or when it's attached to the verb 이다, meaning to be, it actually becomes 이랑계 after a consonant or just 랑계 after a vowel. However, although HYUNGWON can speak Jeolla dialect like a pro, he doesn't use it in his daily life. He's just using standard Korean like all of the other members. And he explains this actually in a short clip that he only uses it occasionally when he gets really mad.
나 어렸을 때 친구들이랑 그 가족들이랑 통화하잖아. 그럼 막 사투리 할 거 아니야. 그럼 막 되게 하지 말라 그랬어. 나 화날 때만 써.
Okay, so that's enough about his dialect, and now let's talk a little bit about his usage of filler words. So filler words are just any word that's used to kind of fill space, and he doesn't really do this much. In fact, I'd say he does it just the same as, any average person, or maybe a little less. But if I had to pick one filler word that he does use a little more than average, it would probably be the word 조금 or 좀, which means a little or kinda or sorta. And I have a few example clips to show you.
느낌이 좀 달라요. 밝게만 해야 되는 건지 아니면은 조금 이런 톤을 좀 잡고 가야 되는 건지가 좀 헷갈리긴 하는데 같이 MC 하시는 전역했다라는 느낌을 생각보다 많이 못 받았었는데 해외로 오니까 조금 나 전역하긴 했구나 이런 느낌이 좀 들더라고요. 근데 일단 좀 연습을 좀 해야 돼요. 저희가 그 안무를 안 한 지가 너무 오래돼서 오기 전에 연습을 좀 하긴 했거든요. 하긴 했는데 아직 마음에 그 불안함이 조금 있어가지고 또 느낌이 좀 색다릅니다. 그래서 오늘 컨셉도 차기 6착인가? 좀 다양하게 있어가지고
활동은 첫 주가 끝나고 아직 좀 더 남아 있으니까 여러분들이랑도 다음 주도 좀 뭔가 많이 이렇게 추억을 좀 만들었으면 좋겠습니다. 그리고 일단 좀 추우니까 좀 다들
그런 것들을 좀 메모장에 밤에 적어뒀었는데 좀 정리를 해두고 이거는 공무할 때 했던 곡이다 이렇게 좀 소개를 좀 드리면 좀 좋은 그게 되지 않을까 싶습니다.
Now, this might sound like he's using it a ton, but 좀 is super useful for softening a sentence. It can make any question or command sound more polite, and it just gives any sentence, more of that respectful feeling without really changing the meaning. And seeing as he is such a polite person in general, I think that this word fits with his personality. Now, 좀 is not the only filler word that he uses, but it's the only one that he uses frequently enough to stand out. And you'll also hear him use other common ones, but not as often, such as the filler word 이제, which means now. And when that's used as a filler word, it's kind of like saying so now. And he uses 이제 quite often, but I wouldn't say it's any more often than the average speaker.
그림에 좀 약해요. 사람이 이제 그 친구들과 같이 생활했다고 했잖아요. 보통 그런 그림으로 이야기하지 않고 저희는 이제 그 생활을 하다 보면 핸드폰을 가지고 있을 땐 서로 대화를 잘 안 해요. 대화를 잘 안 하고 이제 핸드폰을 반납하고 나서 이제 그때 대화가 시작되는데.
Okay, so that's enough about his speaking. Let's talk briefly now about his handwriting, because it was also surprising. I really like his handwriting. So let's take a look at this letter first that he wrote to mon-bebe in 2023 before he enlisted in the Korean military. Now, before I give my analysis of his handwriting, take a few seconds to just look at it yourself. And I think whether you can read Korean or not, you're gonna have the same opinion as I do. Maybe. What do you think? Reading it in Korean, it seems very timid. It's like the letters are shy and hiding at the bottom of the lines. No, but seriously, he writes consistently though. All of his syllables take up about the same amount of space on the page. I can tell he's writing it slowly and he's focusing on what he's writing. Now, he wrote this letter with an ink pen, so one of those really thin marker pens. And when I look closely at his letters, he doesn't do that thing most people do where they slightly flick the end of each letter into the start of the next letter. I don't see any of those strokes in his writing. It's more like he thinks to himself while writing, okay, I'm going to write this letter, now this letter, and so on. And it makes his writing super easy, barely an inconvenience for someone to read it, especially if you're a beginner. So I'm pretty sure that anyone watching this video who's learned the alphabet would be able to read his writing because of that. His letters actually look like the letters you're studying in your books. For example, look at the first sentence he wrote, mon-bebe 안녕. So, hi, mon-bebe. And it's just exactly what you would see a Korean learner write. Each letter in the syllable written separately. Now, it's not flawless handwriting. So now that I've talked about what I really like, let's talk about what makes it actually unique and recognizable as his handwriting. I said that he writes each letter intentionally, one at a time, but this also has the result of making many of his words look unbalanced. So although his words are all about the same height, the syllables in those words are not all the same height, nor are they all the same width. Look at how he wrote this sentence here, where he wrote, 저보다는 mon-bebe 걱정이 더 앞서는 것 같아요. You can see in the word mon-bebe, the mon part stands out and bebe, it's much smaller. Because if you write everything just one letter at a time, it can be really tricky to judge how big to make each letter so that they look like one piece. So instead, each letter ends up standing out on its own. And while this sort of thing would have been totally fine and you would never even know in cursive, because he wrote it like this, it's pretty noticeable. Also look at this sentence here that starts with 다 막아줄 정도로 든든하고. You can see 다 막아 looks much bigger than the rest of the words in the sentence. So he started writing it too big, I think, and then realized that and quickly fixed it. Many of the strokes, though, look a bit shaky. Now, this might be because he's not used to this sort of pen, but it is a bit random at times. Like he writes the letter mium, which is the M letter, correctly using 3 separate strokes, but then he starts the second stroke in that a bit lower than normal. So instead of looking like a square, it kind of makes all of his mium look like a lowercase b, like a blocky lowercase b. Like in this sentence that starts with 멤버들, you can see the bottom one on mem looks fine, but the top one looks like that blocky lowercase b. And many of them look like this in this letter. Look at the bottom of the letter where he also wrote the sentence that starts with 아 그리고, as well as the line right below that, which starts with 그 다음 날. And you can see that both 아 and 그 both look a bit messy. And I can't tell the reason why, to be sure. Maybe the pen was broken or the table was wobbly. I don't know. If anyone knows why, let me know. Anyway, I just have one more letter I want to check, and this one is from 2025. So let's take a look at this one. Here he's using a much thicker pen, but I can still pick out some of the things that he does in the other letter. So first look at the letter mium again, the M letter, and you can see it in the word mon-bebe toward the top in this sentence where he writes 올해는 mon-bebe 만나는 날이 더 많았으면. And every time he writes mium, they look like this kind of lowercase b. So I think this is pretty unique. I don't see this sort of style that often. But in this letter, he is still writing a bit nicer. So perhaps the few messy syllables that we saw in the last letter were just because of a shaky table. I don't know. And although there are no lines on this paper, something interesting is he still leaves plenty of space between his sentences, so everything looks nice and straight. Look at the start of his sentences and how they all line up perfectly. I don't know if he uses like a ruler or something, but everything is perfectly straight in both directions. It's pretty incredible. However, I can still tell here that he's writing each letter one at a time because he's not connecting the syllables together like cursive writing. So this makes it a bit easier to read for someone who's learning Korean compared to other writing styles. So Overall, I can tell that he likes writing a bit slower and putting thought into his letters. Okay, and I could keep going on, but we still have 2 more members left, so that's enough for this episode. If you liked this video, make sure to give it a like and subscribe to my channel for more content like this, as well as free Korean lessons. Thank you to my Patreon supporters and channel members. There's a link you can visit to help support my channel in the video description. Thanks for watching, and I will see you again in the next video where we'll look at HYUNGWON. 그럼 다음에 또 봐!